Try again. Why is live streaming not available right now? Oh, we're live. Okay, an error occurred. Um,
I thought in YouTube it's just a button that you
yeah,
press, just
it
live.
says that it is, and then you do it, and it never actually is. Like you
Oh,
have to connect to a streaming software like Streamlabs. We're blatantly live right now, and people are watching us. You have to connect to a streaming software like Streamlabs, and there we go. We've probably been live this entire time. So,
brilliant.
awesome. I'm on full screen. I got you. So let's just double check that we're there. Hello, everyone, if you're watching. Um, I'm just checking on YouTube to see if. Yep, we are live. Okay. Hello. Um, so let's get started. So, first of all, Tom, welcome to the live stream. Welcome to the BA live stream. We're going to be doing these once a week on Monday or Tuesday, depending on the availability of artists. Tom is the first artist to be on there, and he's one of the biggest crypto artists in the space. He also designs money, like the stuff you can see in the background. Uh, Tell me a little bit about the idea behind your art, where you got to where you are, kind of just a brief kind of catch up of who you are and why you create the artwork you do.
Okay, so yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. Honored to be the first. Um, I'm an artist working in digital drawing and printmaking is how I describe what I do. Um, I've always been an artist. My first love was drawing, uh, same for many artists, and then I had a good crack at painting, and then digital design. And it was due to some very specific industry experience that I had, where I acquired knowledge that was very special and unique, a unique type of printing, and, and how to design for that type of printing, because um, you can print something, but you obviously need to make sure that it can print correctly. So that's what I learned how to do. And I use those same techniques in my work. And so I guess to summarize, fine art background, specific industry experience, and that specific industry experience unlocked my creativity in a way. And the experience that I had was in the security printing industry. And security printing is the printing of anything that you don't want to copy easily, like money or checks or bonds and things like that. And there are lots of conventions in that sort of design and printing, and there's a very specific design language, and I use those techniques and that language in my work. And sometimes what I produce looks like money, and sometimes it is money. um, my work is moving more and more away from the banknote format and um, more into something that takes the visual language of money, and but so it still has that authentic feel, and that's something that I try and achieve in all my work, and that authenticity, and so it itself cannot be easily copied, which is like that's like the holy grail in art, right?
Yeah. So you said that you went to art school, and then later on you went into kind of doing the securities. Would you say you learned more about what you need to do for your artistic craft now, in the kind of security and banknote industry than you did in art school, or would you say that kind of they were equally important, or which one would you say was more kind of impactful?
um Art school, I didn't learn a damn thing. I'm joking. uh I I learned. I decided to focus on video in art school, and I really came to art school with like uh, that was my intention from the first day. Actually, was to explore video, and that played a role later in creating videos, which I love doing. Um, but what really got me excited about printmaking is working in that industry, and it really like connected the dots to a lot of different things. And in art school, printmaking was the only thing that I didn't do. um, I think I was the only one who hopped around from every department. There was painting, there was sculpture, there was new media, and I think I spent at least a day in each one of them. But printmaking, I just couldn't be bothered with. It was too much of a faff. And then working in that environment in a money factory, for want of a better word, that just set this passion on fire for that type of printing. And yeah, that's it.
Oh, that's fascinating. So when you create artwork now, you usually create it. What's the process that you use? What printers do you use to do it? Is it quite a manual process, or do you use kind of printers and things like that when you're creating physical work?
Physical work, yeah. So the work behind me can talk specifically about that, because there's no digital printing on this sheet of paper at all. And all the printing here is not commercially available. So in the last 12 months, I've kind of perfected this technique of creating something that looks very, very similar, almost the same level of printing of a banknote. The techniques behind me is Intaglio Printing, which is, it uses a press, a printing press, and it involves a lot of pressure. So it is a manual process, and it requires a lot of like heavy lifting, and to print a lot of money takes a lot of work. But yeah, the other process here is letterpress, which is a similar process, similar technique. Doesn't require the same amount of pressure, but it's the same principles. The design of something before it makes it to the press is very exact and very delicate, and everything. I mean, it's beyond pixels. It's all done with vectors, so it can translate all those tiny details onto the plate.
Okay, let's get
So yeah.
into kind of the. Actually, that brings us to the next question quite well. Is you've got Kanye West in the background there. What do the faces in your art represent to you, and why do they represent that? What's the kind of meaning behind creating the artwork with these people in it?
Well, I guess first off, I really like the challenge of making a portrait with this engraving style, with lots of lines and dots. There's a formula to it. There's to that engraving technique, and each face is different. And I kind of like the challenge. But beyond that, um, I tend to make things in series. So I like to establish a story between people, and create a thread, some kind of narrative between various faces. When you have a series of banknotes that are released, in the same way, they tell a story of a country, of a culture. And so I like the idea of creating a culture within an artwork, or a window into a culture. And talking of money design, it always represents something, the portraiture on money always represents something official and trusted and branded. And I like the idea of giving legitimacy to things that are sort of on the fringe, or not in the mainstream, are preeminent and in some way prescient. And in the case of Mr. West behind me, that's kind of that's an example of prescience, because he's just recently announced his candidacy for the US election. So it's somewhat within the realm of future prediction.
So, for
Yeah.
those of you who don't know, Tom, you've produced three main series, and then series, and then a few kind of offshoots within that, and that's been the kind of Avatars of the Great Awakening, which is kind of your premier sort of concept. What is the concept behind that? In the first series, you had Ross Ulbricht, Edward Snowden, Julian Assange. Who am I missing? Anonymous,
The anonymous head, the anonymous face.
and Jack Dorsey. And so,
Yeah.
what's the relevance of those people, and how do they kind of connect to each other?
I think there it was in that series of works. It was like really specifically about uh, the disintegrating narratives in the mainstream, And these are all people who have either knowingly or accidentally or surreptitiously revealed information that contradicts the narratives in the mainstream of our cultures. And that was really, where the idea came from to group those people together. Specifically about the leaking of information and how that comes out. And Jack Dorsey was a bit of a weird choice. He's the only one who hasn't paid a personal price yet for I mean, he owns a platform where a lot of this information has surfaced. So in a way, he's been instrumental, whether or not he is part of the same, on the same side of these people. He's still played a part in revealing the information. So I decided to honor him for better or worse.
Okay, great. So the next question is, when you produce an artwork of a person, what traits are you trying to capture? Because there's a lot of talk now about kind of what an artist is trying to imbue their meaning into their work, and what, when we look at that in the future, what we should take from that. And speaking to you as an artist, what do you think is kind of the traits that people kind of want to lionize when they create an artwork of someone?
I think because the engraving technique is so specific and time consuming, it's trying to capture someone's cultural significance. And in each case, I feel the people that I make work out of, speculatively, these things they're not commissioned artworks. So the artwork that I make speculatively, they're all people who have a significant cultural legacy in some way. And that's what that style of portraiture can do. It imbues someone with historical importance, and they should always look as distinguished as possible. And there's no better way to do that than that style, because it says currency. It says these people have value, be it good or bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you trying to specifically, so for instance in the last series, which is the first series with Avatars of the Great Awakening was the Deplorables,
Yeah.
and the next series, this one is the current one is
Parabolas.
Lost.
Parabolas.
How do you say it? Lost Parabolas?
I don't know. It came from, it's always like double meaning, because a parabola is a curve that goes like this, and a lot of time cryptocurrency does that. It just goes whoop. But also las parabolas, it means parables or stories in Spanish. And so it's all these people have stories, strong stories, and the meaning of those people, really, it was all crypto and Bitcoin significance, all people heavily tied to the first 10 years of Bitcoin's life cycle.
So
And
oh, sorry. In that series, you've got William Shatner, Elon Musk, Max Keisner, Arthur Hayes. I'm missing people.
John McAfee.
John McAfee. So what do you think ties them together? And other than kind of their significance in crypto, do you think that they're, as a series, because obviously the first series you did, they have significance in crypto as well. But what do you think ties this series more together?
I suppose they're all people associated with, they're all one step removed from the engineering side of Bitcoin. So they're all commentators, spectators, and so they fit perhaps between the investing public and the creators of Bitcoin, or the people who are credited with some kind of engineering role. And so they're all faces that are friendly, more or less, and they're all known, liked, and trusted in their own ways. You know, I mean, um, they're all very different personalities, of course, but they're all memes of cryptocurrency, with an exception being Terence McKenna, who's the only posthumous portrait on that series.
Yeah.
And Terence is a little bit of the odd one out again because um, he is someone whose thinking and whose message is heavily tied to a graph, to a chart. And the thing that Bitcoin, I think, is fascinating about the rise of cryptocurrency is that it has made trading and charting very accessible to the masses, and charts have become memes in themselves. And
We all love the
that's
Bart
sort of
memes.
what's that?
We all love the Barts.
Exactly, the Barts, the Homer Simpson, whatever it is. Um, and yeah, Terence put forth his time wave zero, which is this chart that ended in December 21st, 2012, and there's this whole Mayan prophecy associated with it. And I find it interesting that that intersects with Bitcoin's life cycle. So in a way, his lifetime, the 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 lifetime of his theories overlapped with Bitcoin, and he sort of painted this scenario, a kind of post Mayan calendar world of te- technological singularity, and then of course the rise of AI, and so there is this technological aspiration off the back of the Mayan calendar that, in a weird way, feeds into cryptocurrency
Yeah.
as a sort of um, fulfilling some kind of prophecy.
Well, that's
Uh,
that's quite interesting. What do you mean when you say that the two charts kind of overlap? And can you elaborate on that a little bit?
well, Bitcoin started in, was it 2009, and then um, Terence McKenna's chart uh, ended in 2012. So, um, and this is a chart that Terence McKenna's chart is something that supposedly charted the progress of human history from prehistory or from early Babylon. And I find it interesting that the evolution of money in Terence McKenna's chart, where its chart ends, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency begins.
Hmm.
And I find that idea sort of interesting because there's no place in human history where something like cryptocurrency could exist. It's taken a very specific confluence of different technologies and different states of mind in order to comprehend what blockchain and what cryptocurrency is. And so, yeah, I find that interesting.
Hmm.
But
No, that's a nice little tie-in. And it's nice that you always have a kind of wild card in your series. Terence McKenna and then Jack Dorsey. I mean, one of them being
yeah,
slightly more significant than the other.
and Terence McKenna, people love that note. I've had the most good feedback about that one. Um, compared to all the others.
Yeah.
And that's quite significant. Feedback from people who are in crypto.
Yeah.
And it's find that quite nice that just because it's cryptocurrency, there is a sort of understanding, shared understanding of things outside cryptocurrency. I'm glad that I had the courage to put
You just kind of capture
Terence
that
in that.
wild card.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so what are your thoughts on this is a big one. What are your thoughts on the deconstruction of art, especially what as in pertains to Western culture? So, the deconstruction of art being like Andy Warhol reproducing things infinitely. Then we moved into the 1990s. We had unmade beds and sharks in tanks, and art became more and more, sorry, less and less refined and less precise, and more about it can be anything you want it to be. I mean, this arguably started with Picasso, but and it can kind of be anything. And what are your thoughts on that? And how do you think that we can, because you create obviously artwork that's very precise, so it's the opposite. It's a reconstruction. So yeah, what are your
Mm.
kind of thoughts on that sort of aspect of the art world?
Big one.
Mm.
Um, in terms of in terms of in terms of conceptualism, um, I mean that started maybe with Duchamp and his ready-mades, and that was a reaction, as far as I understand, that was a reaction against the craft of art that had existed for forever. And it's interesting because around the same time, when I think of Duchamp and early 20th century, there was a reaction against to a lot of the conventions of fine art. So there was a reaction against religion. There was a reaction against rational thought, and I think it all started in the early 20th century. And the thread that runs through it all maybe is it's a lot of ideas um, that have been created by socialism in a way, and all the constellation of ideologies that complement socialism. And I think it's interesting now because that ideology is coming into conflict um, with there is a will to craft something, and there is a will uh, to make something the best it can be. I mean, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking about all the photorealism
Yeah.
that you can find on Instagram, for instance. How to make a photorealistic eye. It's super popular. It's really popular. It is a thing, and that doesn't exist in isolation. I find that the idea that people are really energized by wanting to make art well is perhaps inconsistent with what's been going on in galleries,
Mm.
and I feel like that's part of this cultural conflict.
Mm.
And I mean, maybe it's something to do with self-determination and self-development and um, the internet economy, and cryptocurrency is part of that because that's all about self-determination as well, like wanting to be your own bank. And the equivalent in the crypto art space was be your own artist.
Yeah.
Um, and what ideology has to offer is complaining, basically.
Yeah. No, I
Uh,
mean,
so,
I totally agree. I mean, and going back to the other question I asked near the start is, what was your experience in art school? What was it that you found that they taught you? Did they teach you kind of how to lift things up and create things, or did you find that it was more about the concept? It was more about you know how what a tree is rather than how to paint one.
well, here's the deal with art school. Art school is kind of interesting because there is desire to do things well, obviously, and to craft something. But at the same time, there are all the tutors in art schools. They inherit perhaps the same ideological bias as the art world in general. So they bring that to the table, and I haven't, to be honest, I haven't stepped into an art school in 10 years, 8 years, no, longer, 12 years, however long it was, a long time. So I don't know how qualified I am to talk about art schools now because things can change a lot, and I'm sure have changed a lot. But back then, for me, there still was this kind of this ideology, and it's not strong, or it wasn't strong when I was there. But what um, this ideological bias has done is it's created a set of assumptions that are working in the background, and um, yeah, that comes into conflict now with self-determination and self-sufficiency. I mean, for example, um, we really don't have much to complain about because we have the tools for self-determination at our fingertips. 100 years ago there was a legitimate complaint to be had
Yeah.
against religion or against the upper classes, and there was a legitimate complaint perhaps in the 60s with the student protests. But now, I mean, we're so empowered by technology, um, and these two things, the ideology of the institution and how we're living our lives, are coming into conflict, I find,
Yeah.
to the extent that there's this sort of surging desire in the public for self-determination, but the institutions that we have, be it the institution of politics or institution of art, doesn't necessarily cater to that, and instead this everything is getting squashed into a box of politics. It's getting smaller and smaller and smaller and more intense, and at the same time, the desire to express self-sufficiency is expanding. And we're in that moment in culture where our institutions don't necessarily represent um, the desires of the aspirations of the public. And I realize I'm painting in broad brushes. The art world isn't one thing.
Yeah.
The institution of politics isn't one thing. Like, it's actually lots of different archipelagos with all different agendas. But I suppose what I'm talking about is like a specific portion of the art world, or the political world, that has a controlling
It's
interest.
definitely the one that you hear the most about. I mean, obviously, crypto art is a very different space, but the mainstream art world, I think if anyone walks into a gallery, most people leave confused. And I always said that you shouldn't be confused. If you don't get it, it's not, it's not art to you. You should get it. You shouldn't have to be told all this conceptual stuff to actually understand what the artwork is. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
mm. Okay, so where do you think I don't know what I meant by this, but where do you think this started and why? Not literally this live stream, but where? Yeah. Oh, okay. In pertains to my last question. So, what are your thoughts on deconstruction of art? And we've kind of covered that, but I don't know if we've got any other thoughts on where this kind of started. Why do you think that it started?
Um, yeah, I mean, I would say that early 20th century again. I think Marxism was the first, and socialism was the first kind of cultural coup, and a lot of art movements gravitated towards Marxism as a reaction again against religion, against the conventions of art, and that avant-garde early 20th century stuff was all um, it was all a reaction against the very kind of dusty institutions of art, and there's instant revolutionary appeal.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, um, the our institutions have doubled down on that ideology, and they haven't moved past that. And
It's
yeah, that's
almost as if they think, well, now it's cool, and now everybody's doing it. It's suddenly, it might have been at one point a very revolutionary thing to be is a Marxist, but now every single news organization, well, most, and most institutions are on that sort of side of the fence. It's not very cool or revolutionary at all. It's a very kind of mainstream thing to believe.
sure. And it becomes a self-reinforcing cycle, because if you imagine, say, like when someone has uh, let's say you're a director of a gallery or a luxury brand, and you want to market to a specific audience. What you're going to do is you need to create like an avatar of that audience so they can be marketed to. And so there is an incentive then to tell what a certain generation or a certain demographic, who they are, to sort of dictate to them, you're all communist now, or you're all Marxist now, or you're all feminist now, whatever.
Yeah.
And so it reinforces itself. But in that reinforcing it, it leaves people questioning. And you know we're in a time when I think everyone has a space to question the mainstream narratives, and And yeah, um, someone that I always, uh, an artist that I've always admired, and this is going to sound really, really weird, but an artist that I've already admired from the early 20th century is Salvador Dali.
Yeah.
And I
I don't think that's
remember
weird at all. I think quite a lot of people would admire him.
it's it doesn't really show in my work, but I suppose, I mean, I've always liked him since I was a child, since I was just instantly hooked on anyone who knew me from the age of like 12 to 15 will say this guy's obsessed with Salvador Dali.
Hmm.
And I can remember some art teacher saying, I think you'll grow out of him. Well, I haven't, because Salvador Dali is an example of an artist who kind of carved his own path, and he started out life as a communist and an atheist, and when he was part of the Surrealist movement, and then he died a fascist and a Catholic, and so the message there for artists is, I mean, I'm not any of those things.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call myself a Marxist. Definitely wouldn't call myself a Catholic or a fascist, but I think that's a message to artists now, where you can kind of carve your own path and still make it into the history books.
Yeah.
So I quite like that story.
Well, that's great.
So, yeah.
I mean, I love Dali's work. I'd love to see some of your notes, kind of Daliified. Have you thought about doing some surrealist work? I mean, I can see as well why you would admire him from a technical perspective too, because his art's very crisp and kind of well produced. It's not only surreal.
Yeah, he's someone who was very vocal about his admiration for the old masters, and Velasquez and Da Vinci and Raphael, and he wasn't afraid. At the same time, there was pop art being made. Andy Warhol screen printing. He was making his photorealist stuff, but he still found ways of integrating mainstream culture in his work with, like, Coca-Cola bottles and all the rest of it. And I love that. And that's, there is an element to me, there's an impulse in me that's sort of cartoonish. And it's all the stuff that I do sort of verges on that. The idea of putting Kanye West on a banknote, there is a cartoon impulse in there.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, it's like really well crafted, and that's something that I just can't get away from. That's like that's something that I want to achieve in all my work. But if you were to see what I was doing when I was 12, 13, it was all surrealist stuff. It was all Salvador Dali stuff.
Yeah. Well, no, like I said, I'd love to see that come back in your style. I guess a lot of kind of crypto art with its very flashy sort of is quite surrealist in a kind of new age sort of way. I mean, there's some quite interesting things you can do with GIFs, and that leads me actually into my next question: is what is the most exciting thing to you about crypto art?
So the most exciting thing about crypto is that it's money without the institution of money.
Mhm.
And the most exciting thing about crypto art is that it's art potentially without the institution of art. And that's really, really interesting, because then it doesn't have to obey any of the conventions of art. And that doesn't mean that it's shocking. That doesn't mean that it makes a big impact. That doesn't mean that it does all this, big spectacle things that you might expect. It's freed from bias. It's freed from the mixing out process, from the censorship process that an institution inevitably has. Um, the concern, I guess, with crypto art is that, just like with cryptocurrency, there's been an attempt to institutionalize it and so lend it legitimacy.
Yeah.
And I think that will inevitably happen with crypto art. However, where we are right now is crypto art has emerged in a time in which the mainstream narratives are just disintegrating exponentially. And so the most exciting thing about crypto art right now is that there's a window of opportunity to claim cultural supremacy,
Yeah.
because the old narratives have an opportunity to be questioned. And when I say narratives, I'm talking about pretty much anything. I mean, what governments are asking of their citizens in the last 90 days, just in the last 90 days, has been contradictory, strange,
It's been okay in Japan.
new.
I mean, I'm here. It's not been too bad.
With the exception of Japan, maybe.
Yeah.
In the UK, it's weird. There's even a difference between the different, parts of the United Kingdom. Scotland is having different rules than England and than Ireland,
Yeah.
and so even the most sort of normal, average person is now in a position to ask, I don't, what is really going on in the world? And so there is this sort of exponential disintegration of the mainstream narratives, and that's a great opportunity, and it's a great time for something like crypto art to emerge, um, because it has that great opportunity
Well, I
going
was
forward.
watching something the other day, and someone basically said everything now is becoming politicized. Like, even if you didn't know that this was going on, and you're someone who somehow has been completely out of the political sphere still, it's working its way into almost every industry, and everything's changing. And you'd suddenly
Mm,
be pulled into this, whether you want it or not.
mm,
Something changes as fundamental as that. I think they were changing like Dungeons and Dragons cards or something. I don't think they have cards, but you know what I mean. And they banned a few, and suddenly you're going to start realizing, well, what's going on here? This is something that I didn't know was happening. So in a way, this sort of expansion of, as you were saying, the kind of Marxist way of thinking is pulling everyone into this kind of whirlwind, and people are like, well, this isn't very fun. I want to do stuff that's fun and free and open, and I can do whatever I want. And like you said, I think crypto art kind of might provide that for people.
yeah, I hope so. I think it comes down to what your focus is, and I really see a a separation taking place between people who want to self-determine and people who want to stay with their complaints. And I know how simplistic that sounds, but that's really what it comes down to. And all ideology has offered, in the last 150 years, is just more complaining. And so, what I love about cryptocurrency is that it doesn't care. It just is,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter whether it's taken up by the mainstream or not. It just is, and crypto art could have that same power potentially.
I'm sure some people will find some way to inject ideas that it's not equal into it.
My
Um, okay, so
point for artists is do what you love.
yeah,
Follow the things that you absolutely love, and so you're already part of the avant-garde. If you do that, you're already part of the avant-garde.
yeah.
That's it.
So I'm just going to take a quick check and actually check that we have been live for this whole time, because that would be an absolute disaster. Oh, it seems like we are. Fantastic. We're doing good.
Amazing.
Okay, so 7. Let's actually, yeah. So you've been working with a project called Bullion X, which is on. This is going to sound like absolute gobbledygook to anyone who doesn't know crypto. But it's on the is using the DigiX protocol, which is a cryptocurrency backed by gold, and then also you obviously money. I've spoken to you a few times, and obviously there's the gold standard, which is something which other than crypto, I think before crypto was one of the main things that people were talking about going back to, and that would be the way to do things in a fundamentally correct sort of fiscal system. Um, so DGX is a cryptocurrency that's based on gold, and then Bullion X is a NFT project which mints digital. Oh, actually, maybe you can talk about it. What it is? That would be.
My understanding is that Bullionics is a platform that allows people to create NFTs which are backed by or could be traded in, um, valued in digics, which, as you say, is a cryptocurrency or a commodity-backed token, I should say, where the Digix Foundation, as far as I know, has custodial influence over real gold. So it's all backed by real gold. So essentially, you're able to buy rare digital art either for real gold or you can stake real gold
So
using the Digix
the dig
platform.
the digital art itself, though, it's kind of in the format of like a 3D gold coin. Is that
Yeah,
right?
it's all yeah, it's all it all tends to be 3D, and it can actually take whatever form you want. I just happen to do coins because it's an accessible format, and I wanted something that sort of celebrated gold, and so that the design of them, I had that in mind, that it wanted to be again this, I want to be authentic to gold, to Digix, and so that's what inspired my designs. But in theory, it can take any form. I mean, I have plans, big plans to make gold backed and commodity backed art in a number of forms. So yeah, but it's kind of cool. You can orientate the coin, and there's a front and a back and a reeded edge that you can take a look at, and there's a light source, so you can get the feeling that it's gold. You can also melt the coins down if you want to like release the gold from it.
Yeah.
The And so it's cool because it's a gold play. If you feel good about where gold's going, and I feel good about where gold's going, but it's also a crypto play because you're in the ecosystem, and it's an art play as well, as you get the inherent value of the art that you've bought. So I just recently minted, or it was minted by someone. Um, it was the largest gold coin of a series that I made, and it sold out within 24 hours, I think less, which is pretty cool. And then we're releasing the other three coins of the series, um, I think last Thursday and this coming Thursday.
And
So
what is the theme of this series?
gold, it's honoring gold, and it draws on coin history. So I'm a bit of a coin collector, so I draw my knowledge there. And on the back, it has a famous head. It's called the Liberty head, which featured on U.S. coinage. And on the front, it's got this wreath, and it's very pretty.
Oh, nice. Well, yeah, we'll put a link of that down in the description as well. Okay, so before we get to the Q&A, and I think I may have made a noob mistake, and I'm maybe not allowed a super chat until I get to a certain amount of subscribers. So we may
Oh,
have to pass this one out to the community on Twitter. But how we so what I was going to ask is about your currency, because you're actually launching your own social currency, and it's very important that it's not a currency, it's not a security of any kind. It's a social currency where you can get rewards, and I'll let you kind of explain it. It's called paper, and you can earn 1,000 of it by asking questions on the stream, which I'm not sure you can actually do. So we're going to pass that out to Twitter after.
okay. um, yeah, so paper is a branded social token, and the difference with mine is perhaps compared to many others is that it takes the form of NFTs that can be bought for ETH, and you get the token when you buy the NFT. But it's also physically backed with artwork, and hopefully, I'm going to produce a physical banknote for every NFT that is in existence, for any NFT that's sold. Um, and the other variable in this whole thing is that hopefully, I'm still waiting to hear on a few innovative technologies that would be able to make this possible, or more possible. Um, the holders of the NFTs who have the social token would be able to contribute to the design. So it'd be a socially determined artwork in a way, that could then be redistributed in the form of the physical artwork to its holders. And it's really a way of leveraging what I already do, leveraging certain people in the community, and it comes off the back of me perfecting a lot of these printing techniques, which is a recent development, and I'm happy to be able to offer that to art buyers and to other artists and to the community, because this is a way of celebrating the community, I guess,
Yeah.
In the form of art that I'm most well known for. So yeah, that's it.
Fantastic. So I do have a chat, but it looks as if we have about 3 people watching. So, oh, Jamie Anderson said we see you. That was a long time ago. So obviously when we were talking, people
Like,
were watching. So I've asked. Jamie's watching. I assume a couple of other people are watching. Let's see if anyone asks any questions. And notifications from YouTube. Let's see if anyone asks any questions, and then we can wrap this up. Maybe send something out on Twitter. If not, though, for now, we have got a winner to announce from the original tweet out of 500 paper. So I don't think you're watching, but if you are, we have Skipper Gem has won 500 paper.
Skipper Gem.
Skipper Gem, and that's his tag is at Skipper Gems, Gem X. So we'll tweet
Okay.
it out. Fantastic.
Awesome.
Give it another 5 minutes. See if this is the first one, so hopefully we'll come back for more of this later. Yeah, is there anything else that you want to add before we kind of wrap it up?
Just to say that if anyone is watching, or anyone who is going to watch, you can find more of my work on Blockchain Art Exchange, and also my own website, which is tombadley.net. To find out about paper, you can go to tombadley.net/paper. And my Instagram is tombecoming, TOMBECOMING. That's it.
Oh, fantastic. And actually, before we go, I may as well show. We now have shirts in stock, which are from Tom. Be your own bank, which is something I've said from this. You go to blockchainart.art to own one of these fantastic shirts, and I'm sending one to Tom
That
as
is
well
cool.
very soon. Pretty much all the money goes to Tom. It's 85-15 split, so buy away. And there's also some fantastic other ones on there. So it doesn't look like we're getting many questions in. So for this one, I'm sure we'll come back and do this again. But for this one, I think we'll maybe ask some questions on Twitter or announce the winners that way, or maybe we can save the paper for next time.
Sure.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Tom. I'm now going to end the stream and watch me
Pleasure.
end it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on. All right, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Sorry it was a bit janky. Next time, I promise, I'll be better equipped. I only have one screen at the moment, so it's quite a production. As you can see, you're looking at my back end right now. Thank you so much, and I will see you again soon. All right, that's it. It's over.